fellas, I want to take a moment to talk about an alternative reality, a world in which we as the Destiny community would have embraced Marathon. And I know some of you are very much excited about what Bungie's going to be cooking up next, but I would argue and say that the majority of Destiny players don't necessarily have a lot of love for Marathon. You see, from the moment it was announced, from the moment that Bungie came out and said, hey, this is our next game that we're making, it's going to have all these features, including dedicated servers, Destiny players immediately became defensive. And understandably so. You see, at the time of its announcement was May 24th, 2023, just a few months right after the launch of Lightfall. And if you were to look on paper, Lightfall looked like a success. Matter of fact, it still holds the highest peak numbers on Steam, even beating out the likes of the Final Shape. But those numbers are not inducive of what actually occurred. Lightfall was a disaster. It was the first real expansion post Sony's completion of its acquisition of Bungie, and the expectations were high. Everyone was looking at Lightfall. Hype levels were at an all-time high. Strand was a new subclass, and many people were saying that this was going to be our Infinity War moment, the first half that would lead us into endgame, that being the Final Shape. Narratively though, Lightfall was a disaster. Its pacing was awful. Lore-wise, you could tell that it was filler. Even Bife came out right after the expansion, and I would say Bife was probably the first one that really set the tone, because I was already feeling some kind of way about Lightfall. I was perplexed by its story, its character development. I didn't really understand what anything was, the veil, the radial mass, and it seems like Bungie's only answer to this was that, hey, you would find out more over the course of a year, which nobody liked. And if Bife couldn't even understand what the hell was going on, how in the hell were we supposed to understand what was going on? So fast forward to May 2023, Marathon is announced. And the reception, although yes, to players that weren't playing Destiny, I feel like those folks were excited. They're like, oh, Bungie's working on another game. Cool. But to Destiny players, it did feel like a slap in the face, because it felt like we were the forgotten stepchild. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, but Cross, wouldn't this be the case for any other studio? Old player bases feeling abandoned for the new hot thing that the studio is working on. You'd be surprised how uncommon that actually is. You see, many developers out there that have remained successful in the industry for years have actually garnered enough goodwill that when they do announce the next big thing, they're welcomed with open arms. I'm by no means a dedicated Warframe player, but I absolutely love Digital Extremes, and I've had the best time playing Warframe earlier this year, going through every facet of its story, and my god, does that game have a ton of content. But then I was immensely surprised to see that Digital Extremes was working on another game, that being Soulframe. And what was even more interesting was the polar opposite of what I experienced with the Destiny community. The Warframe community was excited. They were tuning in for the live streams for both Soulframe and Warframe, cheering on the developers at Digital Extreme, and many who were dedicated Warframe players were also playing Soulframe, giving invaluable feedback to DE on how to make Soulframe a better experience. And so far, that game has seen multiple updates over the years, each one making the game even better. And look, I was actually shocked. I was expecting to see blowback. When I saw Soulframe, I was like, wow, I bet they have a mad community on their hands. But it turns out that wasn't the case at all. And really, it's because of DE themselves. You see, Digital Extremes had shown over the years to the Warframe community its level of commitment, its ability to navigate through feedback, its willingness to make sacrifices on the monetary side of things in order to make the player experience better. And what they essentially had was an endless tank of goodwill. Even looking at the Steam chart numbers, Warframe by no means is breaking the bank, but by God, is it consistent. You've got peaks here and there, of course, but you've got a base there that continues to be there for DE over the long haul. Something of which Destiny 2 currently right now is struggling with, which Bungie recognizes, which is exactly why we're getting all these core changes coming in Edge of Fate. Now, whether or not that's going to be enough, we'll have to just wait and see. Regardless though, what is very apparent is that the controversy around Marathon has been met with almost gleeful exuberance from Destiny players. Here we have a situation where you have majority of one community within your own studio praying for your downfall. Now, I'm not gonna lie, guys, it's been entertaining. Seriously, reading your comments, watching things unfold, seeing people running around in the tower with the name "Plagiarism will make me God." Hot damn it, man. Destiny players, you guys know how to troll. But covering the potential delay that seems almost certain that is coming from Marathon just reconfirmed how Destiny players feel about this game. And that brings us to what Destiny players truly believe. Marathon killed Destiny 3. Now, outwardly looking in, I can see why people say that. That moment where Luke Smith was on the camera talking to us before Final Shape was about to launch, telling us that this definitely wasn't going to be it for Destiny, to then just suddenly be let go 1 month after the Final Shape launches. This left us all extremely perplexed. No, the Final Shape didn't peak out at the numbers numbers that Lightfall did, but it wasn't that much under. And arguably, it had the best numbers, at least from a metric standpoint, from search volume to folks watching the raid race. You can't tell me that the final shape wasn't a success. However, despite its success, a portion of the studio was let go. And many have assumed it's not because the final shape wasn't successful. It's simply because Bungie would rather allocate their funds toward Marathon rather than Destiny. But fellas, it goes deeper than that. You see, these funds should have been allocated correctly years prior. You see, following the launch of the final shape, we should have been met with what was going to be coming next for Destiny. And that should have been met with optimism and potentially a sequel. But instead, we were met with what appeared to be a major pullback across the board for upcoming expansions and massive layoffs occurring. And by the way, this was the second wave of layoffs that hit Bungie, all of which seemed to center around Marathon and its delays. Now, let me be clear about what I'm going to say to you now. Marathon is not what's killing Destiny. Leadership is. The folks who decided that instead of actually developing a sequel, it was much better to develop anything else but that. You see, it wasn't just Marathon that Bungie was developing. It was tons of other games that they were trying to take a stab at. Whether it was Gummy Bears, which by the way has been offloaded and sent to Sony, or Matter, which was canned, or the number of other incubation projects. For some unknown reason, Bungie didn't want to make a D3. And that's because it really comes back to what was brought to us many years ago, prior to this Sony acquisition. That meeting took place between Bungie and a summit of creators. The question that was brought up, what is it that Destiny 3 could do that Destiny 2 couldn't already accomplish? It's a fair question. What is it that a D3 can do that a Destiny 2 couldn't? But understand the time that this question was posed to us was in 2019. That was 6 years ago nearly. Things were different. Timelines were different. And at that time, Destiny 2 was still almost a new game. It was just now coming to Steam. Its presence had only really been on consoles and Battle.net. Many of us sat there and thought to ourselves, well, hey, I like Destiny 2. That is a good question. What is it that Destiny 3 could do that Destiny 2 couldn't already do? And at the time, most said, okay, I'm down to see what Destiny can become over the years. What we were not expecting was Destiny 2 to be it forever. Our assumption, or at least my assumption, was that Destiny 2 would at least play out through the Light and Darkness saga, and that there would be a jump to Destiny 3. And it wouldn't just be a jump in terms of story or lore or systematic changes, but instead a technological jump. And if you think we don't need some sort of big jump in our engine, look no further than the fact that you're not getting a vault increase going into Edge of Fate. That vault size that you see right now, that's it, fellas. You're gonna have the same vault size while simultaneously having to farm for a multitude of new weapons and armor, most of which are gonna be necessary to engage in the new content. You see, the question that was brought to us should have been phrased like this: how long are you willing to accept Destiny 2 before you say enough is enough, I want a Destiny 3? What started out here as a video today talking about Marathon and why people have not adopted it, and why the Destiny community themselves are not very receptive to Bungie as a whole, it's really a deeper issue than this. The tank of goodwill at Bungie has been bone dry. And what was even so crazy is that after Final Shape, we actually got a little bit of reserves in that tank. But the massive layoffs told a different story to us. And even though I am cautiously optimistic about Edge of Fate, I can't help but wonder if Bungie is really trying to give us more Destiny by attempting to do less. This is not going to work out for them. This is not going to work out for Marathon. Doing less is exactly why Marathon should be delayed. Doing less is why Destiny 3 was never in production and should have been in production years ago. And you know what's so sad about all of this is that there is a good chance that another wave of layoffs will occur without it truly having an effect on anyone in leadership. I've made comparisons here to Digital Extremes. I've made comparisons between the two communities, and by God, is there a difference between the two? Now, if you think I'm just sitting here glazing Warframe and Digital Extreme, I'm gonna bring up one other studio. Matter of fact, I could bring up a few more studios, but I'll just bring up this one. CD Projekt Red released Cyberpunk in one of the worst states you could ever release a game, literally making it unplayable on consoles. All the goodwill they had accumulated over the years essentially evaporated with that launch. I can't tell you the countless videos that were coming out absolutely and rightfully dogging CD Projekt Red. But then something happened. CD Projekt Red didn't just double down, they tripled down. They announced DLCs that were coming. They did updates to the game, most of which you would only see in a live game. And they simultaneously launched Edge Runners, which is a fantastic show that was interwoven into the cyberpunk world. CD Projekt Red showed all of us that they were willing to make good at whatever means necessary. And boy, did they. I spent the better part of last year playing completely through Cyberpunk. And despite the multiple hiccups that game faced at launch, the post experience, at least for me, completely completely made up for it. Now fast forward to this year. During Unreal Engine's 5.6 showcase, we got to see The Witcher 4 in action. And even though, yes, Witcher is a completely different game than Cyberpunk, the point is, had CD Projekt Red never made good with Cyberpunk, I myself would have been less enthusiastic about The Witcher 4. And this is coming from someone that absolutely adores The Witcher 3. Hell, had CD Projekt Red left Cyberpunk the way it was when it first launched, I probably wouldn't have even purchased or even considered purchasing any other content from them ever again. But they made good. They sustained their goodwill, and they were able to cash out on it with their future endeavors. I'm a firm believer in how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's a common statement that you yourselves have probably heard, but it's something that's very common even in business. And sure, yes, studios out there from a development standpoint definitely have hit or misses, but it's the willingness to stick by your community, even if it cuts into profits just to sustain goodwill. That right there is how a community is formed. We've seen this time and time again. Even Final Fantasy XIV, when it first launched, was, quote, a commercial and critical failure. It was so bad that even Square Enix's president acknowledged the game's failure. Yet Yoshida and his team, they didn't just double down. They relaunched the entire game. They gave us Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, with the primary focus being regaining players' trust. You see, Bungie is well aware of this. Even in their own GDC conference years ago, delivered by Justin Truman, who is now the VP, he laid it out himself. First comes trust, then retention, then revenue. Now listen, whether you like the GDC talk or not, it's kind of whatever. I would argue and say that's a very clear way of looking at live service games. You need trust, you need player retention, and then you should seek out abilities to profit. My concern right now with Bungie is where they think they are at in that stage. I don't think they're foolish enough to think that they're in a revenue stage, but perhaps they think they're in a retention stage. My argument would be that we're already back to square one. We need to have trust in Bungie. Many people are speculating that the Edge of Fate is just Bungie trying to give us the bare minimum product at the lowest cost possible. And that's not how you build trust. That's a revenue standpoint, which I still don't even believe that should be part of Destiny's process, or really any game development's process that's trying to compete in this space where the competition is only getting better. And we're not even talking about Marathon's competition, which is stacked. But even in Destiny's space, we're actually seeing for the first time other games popping up. The Cube was one that was recently announced, and that game is looking to be bringing everything it can to compete directly with Destiny 2. When you drop your own trailer and Destiny 2 is in your tags, and even your CEO comes out and says that Destiny 2 was a big inspiration for the game, that tells you right there, this is not another Anthem 2.0. Anthem wouldn't even acknowledge that Destiny existed, despite literally inviting every Destiny creator in the space. I have no idea what BioWare's plan was, and it's clear they didn't have a plan either. What I will say though to Bungie directly on this is you're back to square one, and this applies to everything you're working on. First is trust, and that should literally be the focus for potentially the next few years. And I'm not saying that Bungie shouldn't make money. Look, man, I get it. It's a business. You want to make money, make money. But I'm so fearful that we're in that revenue stage, and that's all Bungie is seeing right now. When we have neither the trust or goodwill or even the player retention right now to afford Bungie cashing out. When one of Bungie's biggest selling points for the year of Destiny content that's coming is literally Renegades, which is like some sort of Star Wars spinoff. And look, I'm fine with Star Wars, but that 1000% screams cash out. Money bags are on the mind. When it's been revealed to us that the directory won't even have a destination that you can click on for the new destination, that being the Kepler destination Edge of Fate, when your next suite of abilities are really just destination abilities that are not very exciting to folks. Yes, I'm excited about the systematic changes. I'm excited about the lore and the narrative. I'm excited about builds. I think builds are going to be great, but I can tell you right now, I don't pay Bungie's bills. And just comparing this year's numbers to last year's numbers and just gauging the hype levels, fellas, I'm kind of concerned. If you're telling me Ride of the Nine is supposed to compare to Into the Line and Pantheon, ain't no way in hell. We're talking the difference between an entirely new activity and a blend of raids that literally was like raid boot camp going into final shape versus old dungeons that brought back some old loot with different roles that most of you are probably going to discard once we get into Edge of Fate. And I would argue and say that the numbers speak for themselves. Bungie, you are at an inflection point with your community. Now is the time to develop goodwill across the board. This applies to not just Destiny, but also Marathon. Listening to hosts talk about Marathon, giving us corporate dialogue ain't gonna cut it. And I know that meeting wasn't necessarily meant for us. It's meant for investors. As if that's supposed to make a big difference for me. It doesn't. I could give a shit less if you own Sony stock. And for my long-term bag holders, congratulations. Sony stock actually just retook its high that had not been reached since 1999. Hot damn, that's a long time. But regardless though, I don't care about the corporate talk. I just want Bungie to know themselves themselves that they are back to building trust again, and that should be the focus over the next year. So guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.